the hard place. Like a wind from Goldland he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia. And with me on the other line, Josh Sewell and Jason Evans. Welcome back, guys. Welcome for a very special episode, one that I've been greatly anticipating. You can say hello, by the way.
How's it going?
We don't have to be that professional on the podcast.
I want to say that I didn't realize until we started researching this episode how freaking amazing the guy that we're going to talk about is.
Yeah.
Yes. This
I guess I knew, but at the same time, until you really just go, okay, let's look film by film by film at his filmography, and you go, oh my God, there's no misses in here.
The greatest movie star of our lifetime, which brings, if you haven't figured it out yet, we're talking about Mr. Tom Cruise because Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is coming out in theaters, and in trying to determine how we were going to cover this movie, which you guys have seen and I did not see because I was in New York seeing Bob Odenkirk, Kieran Culkin, and Bill Burr in Glengarry Glen Ross. Really fun show,
lucky.
by the way. We all realize that sort of like Tom Cruise sort of is one of the movie figures that binds us all together. We are three different generations, and Cruise is a centerpiece of 80s movie culture, 90s movie culture, and I would argue 2000s movie culture. So we're going to go decade through decade and kind of attempt to put together kind of a Tom Cruise Hall of Fame with 4 movies of each decade. And then at the end, we're just going to lump the 2010s and the 2020s into one. And we'll explain why later, other than it's pretty obvious Cruise kind of slows down in making movies.
Yeah, and, to go with to add to what Jason was saying earlier, this is tough to do when the guy we are talking about has been making movies for 5 decades. Like, starting in the early 80s.
Making great movies for 5 decades.
Yeah, starting in the early 80s, going through literally, next week. 5 straight decades of mostly hits. The misses are there, and when he misses big, but I think that's just because he aims so big,
And the misses are nonetheless fascinating.
They're still interesting.
That's why I'm kind of curious to we gave each other in our sort of respected decades free reign to just pick whatever 4 movies we want. So I think we have an idea on some big ones that will more than likely appear on each other's lists, but also gave each other the free reign to pick weirdo ones that might be that we just might want to champion and the other ones might scoff at, because the even the misses in Cruise's filmography are fascinating big swings that nonetheless I think give you some insight into him as a movie star and what he meant for movie culture in that particular decade.
Yeah, there's only a handful. I'm thinking of one in particular that I was just like, why did he do that? And part of it feels almost, and we'll talk about it when we get there, but it's late in his career, but there's only one that made me go, I can't understand why he would have, the justification for doing that. But all the others, very, even like you said, even when they don't work, you're going, okay, I can at least see where his head was at and why he wanted to approach this.
Right. They're all very calculated decisions in a sort of fascinating way. Jason,
this is going to be a super long episode, Jesse. Let's get to the new one.
Let's get to. Okay, so I really want to hear what you guys thought about the new Mission Impossible movie. I've mentioned to you guys before, this is my favorite movie franchise because of the 7 previous ones, I would say there is only one bad one, and it is Mission Impossible #2. All the others, I think, range anywhere from solidly fun to one of the greatest action movies I've ever seen. I'm fascinated.
Actually, I don't disagree. I think you're right about that. I think that's pretty. Yeah.
So I'm fascinated then, what did you guys think of this 8th film, which is really being marketed as kind of the Avengers Endgame to the Mission Impossible franchise. Is like this is the culmination of a story you didn't realize you've been watching since 1996 or whenever that first Mission Impossible came out.
Let me just say right now, they do try to do that whole thing
Absolutely.
like, oh, what about, look at this thing that happened in movie 3 and in movie 1, you know, it's BS. It doesn't work. That's actually one of the worst parts of the movie, in my opinion, is all this stuff where they're like, oh, but this thing that happened 18 years ago, that impacts today. That doesn't work. What works in this movie is the stunts, which are just absolutely, I mean, of course, the stunts are incredible. I think the tension really works in the movie. I don't know why, because is it a spoiler for me to go, hey, Tom Cruise saves the world? You know, we all know how it's going to end.
I didn't know. Honestly, I would not have been surprised if you guys texted me afterwards and were like, so the movie ends with Cruise dies, and then we like pan out to Washington, D.C., and the George Washington Monument has just been replaced with like a giant Ethan Hunt statue or something. like if Cruise was going to go, it would be like the then end of the movie is like, and now the President of the United States is bestowing a national holiday. It is Ethan Hunt Day or something.
No, it's actually him going, nobody takes a franchise from me. Ethan Hunt was Jack Reacher all along.
Yeah. So back to the movie works on an action level. I think we've come to know a lot of these characters that surround him so well that we really care about them. There's a character who was in the very first Mission Impossible movie who does come back for this movie, and in a surprisingly great way that I came in. I just loved this character.
Yeah.
Even though he was like nothing in the first Mission Impossible movie, and I'm not going to give away who it is.
He was a punchline in the first movie. Yeah.
Oh, now I can't wait to see who it is.
He's a fully fleshed out, really interesting character in this movie. So there are a lot of good things about it. And my bottom line would be, I enjoyed it. It's a good movie. That said, it is incredibly clunky, full of really bad exposition, characters who just sit down and go, let me explain things to you for 10 minutes. That is just dizzying at times. It is way too long, like frustratingly long.
It's almost 3 hours, correct?
Yeah, and there's not enough plot for that. So what we get instead is amazing action sequences that go on 30% too long at least. And it's unfortunate. I also think, frankly, that the whole overall plot is a little bit like, what, really?
It's kind of continuing the same thing with like the lost nuclear submarine and the crucifix key from the seventh one, correct? Okay.
And it's frankly too much. The great, and I'll let Josh get in a second. To me, the great Mission Impossible movies are a little more localized. There can be a big, huge threat, but the action is a little more personal, and things. You don't have entire governments, the whole world involved in the scheme. And they tend to be more like heist kind of, almost Ocean's 11-ish kind of, we're pulling off a scam here. And I don't think we got nearly enough of that in this film. Again, it's not a bad film. I enjoyed it. It's a good movie. It's worth seeing. This is what movies are made for. But it is not, in my opinion, in the top half of the movies in this franchise.
We're roughly on the same page. I was thinking before Jason started giving his take on it that this is a really, really good 2-hour movie. Unfortunately, it's 3 hours long.
Bingo.
The in-game comparisons are warranted. They're really trying to do an MCU thing here, but where in-game did it better is they knew whoever was going to see this movie, it would be pointless to try to catch up newcomers. So all 3 hours of Endgame is just, you already know the stakes, you already know the mission. In Final Reckoning, the first hour is them rehashing events of the last 7 movies through exposition.
That's really unappealing to me, because I would agree with you guys. I do not think that these movies, like when I heard this when I started hearing from you guys that this one was like really plotty, I sort of first brushed it off as like, well, a lot of these movies kind of get plotty, but like the plot isn't like, like the first Mission Impossible movie I often joke is like incomprehensible to like follow, but you're sort of so caught up in the set pieces and they're coming so fast that like you kind of get caught up with it anyway. Is this, but hearing that this is a case of like a good half of this 3-hour movie is just sort of like doing a joke or two of like, let's relitigate the first movie and like we really need to catch you up, like that seems like a miscalculation on their part about what works about this franchise.
Yeah, absolutely, because what made almost every other movie work is ultimately the MacGuffin didn't matter. Whatever doodad that they were going after was just an excuse to get the team together and have some quips and some stunts and some cool fight scenes. The first hour and change of this movie is, but what if all those things did matter? And so they're going back to retroactively give you excuses for the things they were going. And there was one moment that, and obviously we won't spoil it here, but like where a character is revealed to be somebody for no other reason than just to connect to another film, and you heard
the theater laugh. Everyone laughed.
Somebody 3 seats down from me was like, oh my God. And they were like, this is the most George Lucas bullshit.
And that feels extra baffling because like this series only really started like having its own kind of internal continuity around like movie 5, I would say. Like,
I agree.
Like the later movies that Christopher McQuarrie, like his big, contribution to the series, I think of is both sort of like solidifying Ethan Hunt kind of as a character of sort of like tracking his personality and psychology movie to movie, but also kind of like building a kind of internal world continuity that you can follow movie to movie. Those first 4 Mission Impossible movies are basically, they're kind of like a director's showcase. It's just Tom Cruise going to De Palma or John Woo or Brad Bird or J.J. Abrams and saying like, do your version of a Tom Cruise spy movie. And you can kind of, there's really like, Cruise almost even feels like he's playing different characters in those movies.
Other than the members of the team being the same, those movies, there's not a great connection from one to the next. And you're right, starting around 5, they start to, weave threads through them.
So that's why it baffles me that you would then try to like retcon, make it seem like that feels like kind of the trap that the Daniel Craig Bond movies a bit fell into, in my opinion, was like, we don't need to make it so like this random thing that happened in Casino Royale, it was actually like Blofeld behind the scenes the entire time, but like no one really knew it.
To bring it back and make yet another in-game connection, because that really does seem to be the feel that this movie is going for. Do you remember when all of us were, it kind of felt like Endgame was like giving you the finger when it's like, oh, you hated Thor the Dark World? Well, guess what? Now it's important. That's what it's like, oh, you think 1 and 3 don't matter? Now they're the most important entries, and you're just like, but why? And especially when all of that is out of the way, once it's acknowledged and disposed of, it starts to feel like a Mission Impossible movie again.
Yeah, and in the end, that stuff doesn't really matter to Tom Cruise pulling off a series of impossible, stunts / action sequences. And Jesse, we're sitting here, we're kind of killing the movie, but it is a super fun, great time in a theater with.
I want to ask you guys what the best best set piece of the movie is.
Oh, Tom Cruise on the airplane. Tom Cruise on the biplane.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's other people
by
are
the way,
little...
it's.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it is the kind of stunts I don't feel like I've ever seen before. I know that they use safety measures and that Tom Cruise is not going to die. But if you told me that he fell off and died at one point, I'd be like, yeah, that's probably what happened.
That tracks.
I mean, it is really, really great stuff.
How does in particular, or Josh, if you have a different favorite set piece, I'm curious, like how does that compare to, like, where does it rank in the pantheon of great set pieces in this franchise of like the Langley heist, the Burj Khalifa thing? I bet you could throw anything in Fallout could be on that ranking.
Well, I can't remember where I've been seeing it. Just social media has been blowing up now that the embargo is up. But I tend to agree with the person I read who said it feels like the assembly cut of Fallout. Like it feels like Fallout before they cut the extraneous stuff. It just feels shaggier. Like, you know, you hear a lot of Christopher McQuarrie on these epic length podcasts saying like, well, Fallout was like 6 hours long before we edited it. And I was like, this is the version of that he's just like, it's fine, put it out. Which is frustrating because, like I said, there's a really good 2-hour movie in here. Is it a mind-blowingly different 2 hours than the other Mission Impossibles we've seen? No, it would be another really good entry in the franchise. But the fact that they're building this up to be the culmination of 30 years of filmmaking, I think the marketing is going to do it a disservice. But yeah, the plane sequence is fantastic. I really liked the sub sequence just because I've got claustrophobia and so it was terrifying to me. But even that it goes on a
But
little
it's worth
long.
noting both of those go on.
Yeah,
I mean, I
at
kid
least
you not,
20 minutes.
15 minutes longer than they needed to.
Yeah,
Think about that.
and
Like you could have made this movie. You could have made this movie into a 2 hour and 20-minute movie merely by removing extraneous action stuff that doesn't affect the story at all.
and exposition.
Well, you could have made it an hour and 45 without the exposition.
But what's frustrating about the plane sequence, and again, these are spoiler proof movies, right? But like the fact that the plane sequence enters the story where it does is really frustrating because it only happens because the story necessitates, oh, we need one more action sequence. The story is essentially wrapped up until unnamed characters do something stupid solely to keep the movie going.
Well, and what's more, just really quick, and then I think we should move on with other stuff. The plane sequence, to me, like interrupts the story momentum of the finale. The plane plane sequence is part of the finale, but sort of the real part of the finale is taking place elsewhere, and the tension that's going on elsewhere is almost interrupted by this interminably long but incredibly cool plane sequence.
What's frustrating about that, in addition, this is the first Mission Impossible movie since 4 where it feels like you've got a team movie and Tom Cruise. But what's frustrating
he's very
is
separate from the team.
He's hardly in any prolonged scenes with his other co-stars.
A case of maybe the Cruise ego getting a little overwhelming in this movie.
And what's frustrating is like it's the team stuff to me was more interesting. So
I agree.
Tom Cruise is there for the stunts, but if you're looking for comic relief, interplay, witty dialogue, all that's happening when he's not on screen.
Although he is really funny a couple times.
Yeah,
he has a couple really funny scenes.
That's a shame because really what I've really liked, I think this series, like, and this is another thing I think McQuarrie has been really good at sort of putting his thumb on, is like the movies are better when they are kind of a team movie, and like the audience gets to basically live through the Simon Pegg and the Ving Rhames, like they get to be the audience surrogate of just sort of like, holy cow, I can't believe that Tom Cruise is doing this. What a maniac. And like removing that seems to be getting rid of an important ingredient that has made these movies so entertaining.
By the way, Haley Atwell is incredible. It's great in this movie.
And is,
thank God.
To refer back to something Jason was mentioning earlier that I won't spoil, like this character that we've been talking about, when they show up, you think, oh, it's just going to be so that we can wink at the audience and we're going to kill him off really quick and he got his bow. No, they play a central part and they're one of the best parts of the movie.
yeah. And the other person I want to shout out, and then again, we've got to move on.
I'm going
to butcher her last name. Pom Klementoff, something like
Pom
that.
Clementeeth. Yeah.
That's it.
She's great.
I thought she's excellent in this movie. She has soul in this movie. In a way that I'm not sure any of the other characters did.
Yeah, this is a real spotlight for character actors, even when it's the first time, like Katie O'Brien is in this as part of a sub team. She's fantastic. I don't know the actor who plays the sub captain. He's incredible.
Oh, he's the sub captain is from Severance. I blanked on the guy's name. He is the guy who's in charge of the severed floor African American actor. I'm sorry, Milchick. Yes, it's
Mr.
Milchick from
Milchick?
Severance.
Yeah.
What?
He rocks in this
great.
movie. He is
He's
so
good.
great in this film.
Yeah, Nick Offerman, he doesn't get a lot to do, but he's really solid. So like it's McQuarrie giving all of these recognizable faces a ton of stuff to do because Tom Cruise is busy doing other things.
Well, I'll check it out and I'll fill in on my take in the coming episode, but a little deflated hearing this one sounds like a bit of a mixed bag, but
Jesse, it's not a bad movie.
It's still a fun summer movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than the last one. I know you like Dead Reckoning. This is better than Dead Reckoning to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into our Cruise game and let's time travel back to the 1980s when I wasn't born and I don't know what Josh was doing, but Jason was probably doing like beer kegs or something, whatever you were doing in the 80s.
Well, I just looked, and according to IMDb, I am the perfect person to have on this podcast because not only am I very handsome like Tom Cruise, it's also because his first movie, you weren't supposed to laugh that hard at that.
We'll let YouTube decide that.
But his first movie is Endless Love in '81, which is the year I was born. So I exist in the world of Tom Cruise.
So for Jason, as someone who was going to the movies in the 80s, what did Tom Cruise represent as an 80s movie star? And then offer us your 4 films that you think best represent the Cruise 80s.
Oh my gosh. What did he represent as a movie star? I would say he started out representing like the teenage, good-looking, everyone had a crush on him, every guy wanted to be him.
Mm-hmm.
But the amazing thing that happens in the 80s is by the end of the decade, he has matured into one of the best young actors around. Mm-hmm. And, it's tough, I think, now that he is his age and we're looking back on things. But by the time I get to my 4th film on my list from the 80s, we're like into is Tom Cruise going to win 3 or 5 Best Actor awards in his career? I mean, that's where it feels like he's going. Yeah. And then Josh will pick up with the 90s. But let me start. I'm going to start by saying folks need to see a film called Taps. It does not count.
I've never seen Taps. So this is one of my blind spots.
By the way, when we saw Final Reckoning, I was sitting. My guest was my cousin, who is a professional actor. He's been in a few films. He's been in a lot of commercials, done some TV. He's a professional actor, big fan of Tom Cruise. Not a big Mission Impossible guy, but he was thrilled to go see this. And I mentioned to him beforehand, I was like, oh, Taps. And he was like, oh, I've never seen that. So I'm not here to say this is one of the essential Tom Cruise movies from the 80s because Tom Cruise has he's like the 4th or 5th character in this movie, maybe even 5th or 6th. But Taps is first of all, it's a great film. It's about some guys at a military academy and there's some mishaps and these military cadets, not even cadets, they're still like they're high school, they wannabe cadets are suddenly facing off against like the police and the real military. But it stars Timothy Hutton, but it's like the first film with Sean Penn. It's really the first. Wow. It's the first decent role, first time you'll ever remember Tom Cruise being in a movie. There's a young Giancarlo Esposito in this film. I'm just going to tell you, you got to see Taps. It's a great movie.
I'll rent it this week. I'll check it out.
There you go. All right. So the film you have to start with Tom Cruise in the 1980s is, of course, Risky Business, is the film that caused the world to fall in love with him. If you are not my age, you don't understand what an icon Joel Goodson, the character he played, how much of an icon it became. Everyone on the planet was wearing dark Ray-Ban sunglasses because of him.
How often have you danced around in your underwear in the living room to who sings Old Time Rock and Roll?
Bob Seger.
Bob Seger.
Yes.
Yeah. How often have you done that, Jason?
I will fully admit, every kid and every teenager in the 80s, you did that at some point. I did it. It's embarrassing, but it was a thing. And By the way, there isn't a single teenage boy in the world who didn't want to be Joel Goodson to have sex with smoking hot Rebecca De Mornay.
I remember seeing this movie as a teenager, and my only knowledge of it was the Bob Singer dancing scene. And when I remember my best friend in high school and I watched the movie and we're like, wait, this is like a super horny movie about Tom Cruise like turning his house into a brothel.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, the way he makes all the he gets the girl, he makes all the money, he gets to drive around in a Porsche, he gets into Princeton. It has everything. It's a great script, great pacing. It's funny, exciting, sexy. It's everything an 80s movie should be. This is where you begin with essential Tom Cruise with Risky Business. I'm going to do something controversial now. I'm going to skip Top Gun. Because you know everything you need to know about Top Gun. Everyone's seen Top Gun. Everyone knows it made Tom Cruise into a superstar, the likes of which we've very rarely seen in history. You don't
Jason,
what's
your email address so the listeners and people on YouTube can send their comments to you?
Not giving it out. No, I'm skipping Top Gun because there are other movies that are more. So the amazing thing is that after he does Risky Business, Top Gun, All the Right Moves, these crowd-pleasing movies, he goes and does Color of Money. He could have picked anything he wanted. I'm sorry?
Great movie. I'm not disagreeing with you. I love that. One of my favorite Paul Newman performances too.
Comes out the same year as Top Gun, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yes. After Risky Business and Top Gun, he takes this. It's a complicated role.
Mm-hmm.
That he's playing in this film. It's a big swing for Tom. I think he's electric in it. We need to root for Vincent at times, and we need to be super frustrated and angry at Vincent at other times. This is real acting. This is not what he does in Risky Business and Top Gun. And to go opposite Paul Newman, one of the greatest actors of all time. And look, the film
Paul Newman, who is stepping back into a role that is one of his more iconic roles.
Yeah. And let's be clear, the film belongs to Paul Newman. So here's Tom Cruise, who's the biggest star in the universe, and he's like, yeah, but I'm giving the film to someone else. This is just, everything about this is a risk on Tom Cruise's part, and it's not what you would expect him to do. But this is Tom Cruise announcing himself as a serious actor capable of award-quality work in serious movies that aren't just about selling tickets.
That's directed by Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a little outrageous, by the way, that Paul Newman wins Best Actor. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio gets a Best Supporting Actress nomination. Tom Cruise gets nothing for this. And to me, that's frustrating because I look back on this as one of the better jobs of his career. And speaking of awards, let's go next. My next essential one, Rain Man.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it's a travesty that Dustin Hoffman wins Best Actor for what's essentially a one-note role. Just play it dumb and be endearing. And Tom Cruise gets no award credit at all for playing Charlie Babbitt. Charlie Babbitt is the character that changes in this movie. It's Charlie who has to go from the money-grubbing, morally ambiguous guy to someone who finds family, finds the ability to love someone and care for someone, and finds the ability to be selfless. Tom Cruise is the one who goes on the journey in Rain Man.
I love this take.
It is not Dustin Hoffman, and frankly, the award should have gone to Tom Cruise, and it is an award-winning, award-quality performance.
Yeah, and especially, it's one that shows him taking risks that I don't even think he does now when he has all the power in Hollywood. He's playing a guy who is eminently hateable for an hour and 45 minutes of this 2 hour movie.
Yeah, it's the real. I love that take, Jason, because it really is an example of the Oscar going to the person who has the showier role, but Cruise really the more times that I've seen that movie, Cruise has the much harder role, and the movie doesn't work if his performance doesn't work.
Yeah, look, the movie isn't great because Dustin Hoffman mutters about what time Wapner is going to be on. The movie's great because we put ourselves in the shoes of Tom Cruise's character of Charlie and experience all this alongside him. So, my next essential one, my last one, is Born on the 4th of July. I think Jerry Maguire is the best performance of Tom Cruise's career. but I think this is a close second. He comes into Born on the 4th of July. At the beginning of that film, he is the gorgeous, young, hunky Tom Cruise that we all know and love. And then he uglies it up in a big, big way to portray the very, very hard parts of Ron Kovic's life in a wheelchair. I mean, Tom Cruise goes for it, and he goes for it with Oliver Stone, who had just made Platoon, which is frankly one of the great movies of the 80s.
Hot take, I think Born on the 4th of July, even better.
I'm not going to disagree with you. For Tom Cruise, a guy who always eyes box office and mass appeal, for him almost always being the guy who plays the one that we love, the one that we root for, this is his most bold choice of roles, and it's stunning to me that after Top Gun, that Cruise then does Color of Money, Cocktail, Rain Man, Born on the 4th of July as his next films. Other than Cocktail, he is taking risks left and right. And the fact that he didn't win any awards for Color of Money, Rain Man, or Born on the 4th of July is sad. And in retrospect, I wonder how that impacted what was going to come next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Born on the 4th of July one is interesting because he loses to Daniel Day-Lewis for a kind of similar role, like another like person in a wheel, like person with a disability role. Yeah, all
Not
great.
That you ever complain about? Look, Daniel Day-Lewis deserves all the awards.
I know.
I get that.
It's just a sort of like, wow, what a stroke of bad luck is like you lost to Daniel Day-Lewis doing like another disability performance.
All right, we get to the 90s now. It's Josh's turn.
Yeah, go Josh.
To sort of segue from what Jason said, which strong choices, obviously, but this is also when you see him make a clear choice to not always chase box office, that he says, I'm going to use this time in my career where I'm the next hot thing to stake my claim in this industry by working with like legendary filmmakers. I'm going to work with Ridley Scott. I'm going to work with Scorsese. I'm going to work with Oliver Stone. Right. And so that leads us into this era where I feel like his instincts for quality filmmakers and good
By the way,
stories-
Josh, you didn't mention Kubrick there.
And Kubrick.
He works with Kubrick.
Well,
Kubrick,
I was getting
PT.
there. I was talking about
Yeah.
the 80s, right? But then to go into...
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah.
So, our first one in the 90s, I think, kind of like you said with skipping Top Gun, I think it's safe to skip Days of Thunder because it's Top Gun with race cars, right?
Yeah.
Far and Away, which, again, I think is one of his sort of well-intentioned misfires. But again, working with Ron Howard, who is, one of the biggies. It's an epic that I don't know if it's aged that well. There's some really great cinematography. I don't know if his accent work is the best in this movie, but
Another rare one I've never seen. Never seen it.
It came, in the 90s. It was on cable like every other day, But I think the first truly great Tom Cruise movie of the 90s is A Few Good Men in 1992. And again, working with Rob Reiner in the middle of that guy's one of the hottest streaks in Hollywood history. He's going from like When Harry Met Sally to Misery to A Few Good Men to with Princess Brides in there. So
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me
in there as well.
Yeah, like Rob Reiner's just throwing no hitters, and so you're getting Rob Reiner at the top of his game, Tom Cruise at the top of his game, standing toe to toe with Jack Nicholson, who's not in it a lot, but when he's in there, he makes it count. And it's
Nicholson's in it for like 12 minutes, and it's like the greatest 12 minutes of acting you'll ever see.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh my God, yeah. And he's going toe to toe with just tons of great character actors, and it's showing you, yes, he's great at action, but this is a dude that when he picks the right role really brings it with the acting. And the Aaron Sorkin screenplay, we know that not every actor can pull off that kind of dialogue. It could come off really kind of preachy and heavy-handed. He makes it work. I
wish he had done more Sorkin scripts. He's so like him. He's up there with like Jesse Eisenberg and Jeff Daniels of just sort of like the best people that I've ever seen, like be able to like turn that dialogue into almost music.
Yeah,
like
and
it's
just
just
a
so
classic-
effortlessly throw it out.
Yeah, just a classic Sorkin character of somebody who is really good at his job, but gets close to being destroyed by his own ego. Just a standard kind of Sorkin character. But so starting the '90s off strong, and then you got some
Hey, Josh, just
yeah.
really quick on A Few Good Men.
Uh-huh.
One of the other things that I think Cruise is really great at in that movie is that I think it's the worst performance of Demi Moore's career.
It's not great.
She's
Yeah.
she's almost unwatchable. I mean, and like, unfortunately, it's in a film where, like, of course, Nicholson's great. Kevin Pollak is really good. Kevin Bacon's great. J.T. Walsh is. It is.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland has like a little part, but he's just crushing it for the 5 minutes he's on screen.
It's just a murderer's row. Yeah.
Yeah,
First
and then you
time
have
he works
Demi
with
Moore.
Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you've got Demi Moore. Like, I don't even know what the heck she's like in a different movie than everyone. It's awful.
Yeah.
But Cruise is with her for the most part.
Yeah.
And he has to carry all the scenes that they're in together because she's so bad.
Holds her hand and walks her way through it. And Demi Moore can be great in the right role. I think she's just woefully miscast here. But
this just in, Aaron Sorkin doesn't write good female characters.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Shocker, right,
that's
yeah.
the issue.
And so it pains me to do this, but it's sheerly just because the 90s are so crazy for Tom Cruise that, like, he follows that up with The Firm. If you haven't seen The Firm, this will be my taps, right? If you haven't seen The Firm, watch The Firm. This was in the middle of John Grisham's huge explosion into pop culture, and takes the sort of kind of cocky guy that he plays in A Few Good Men, another lawyer, and brings a darker spin to it. Again, not afraid to be unlikable for large stretches of that movie because he knows the character has to undergo some evolution. Follows that up with what I think is one of the biggest swings of his career, even though it doesn't really work, which is Interview with a Vampire. He plays Lestat with Brad Pitt.
I think he's good in that movie.
He's
actually
good. The movie itself is not, but I'm gonna give him all the credit for going way outside of his comfort zone and doing something he's never tried before. Still brings the charisma to the role. The movie has some issues. I still think he's a little miscast, even though his performance in it is really solid. If nothing else, for that, like, groan-worthy, eye-rolly final scene, right, with Christian Slater.
Hey, Josh, just because I'm trying to keep track, so make sure you tell me when you get to the 4 essential ones.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just saying the 90s are crazy. So right now, definitely essential is A Few Good Men. The next one, it's got to be essential, is Mission Impossible. Because that's the reason we're here today, right? It's this spawns 7 other movies, makes him one of the greatest action stars of the 20th/21st centuries. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because he's so incredibly successful at this that it essentially sidelines the acting part of his career for large stretches of time, which is, I think debates we're still having today is like, is Tom Cruise the incredible stuntman worth losing Tom Cruise the great actor? Because it's tough to do those things at the same time. You can't really emote from a plane,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would say, just because of the sheer impact it had on pop culture, that one definitely has to be there, and it's still up there as one of my favorite entries in the franchise. I think De Palma's doing some really cool stuff there, even though, like we were talking earlier, if you try to explain the plot of this movie to somebody, you sound like one of those raving lunatics with the red string all over your wall.
You really do turn into the Charlie Sheen meme of like trying to explain the conspiracy whiteboard.
But that's kind of where De Palma puts you in that headspace, is like you're looking around every corner. You think everybody's a traitor, so it kind of turns you into a lunatic, which I think is one of the selling points of the movie. Follows that up, not even follows up, in the same year, Jason alluded to this earlier, gives us Jerry Maguire, which might arguably be the best performance of Tom Cruise's career, because he's essentially deconstructing himself. Like Jerry Maguire is essentially Tom Cruise as a sports agent. And how long can I coast on my charisma when all of my colleagues are wondering, when is this meteor, or, when is this, pick your mixed metaphor here. When is this rocket going to explode, or when is this star going to burn out? And again, not afraid to play unlikable, especially in his scenes with Renee Zellweger, where he's really taken advantage of this woman who clearly has feelings for him because he needs validation that he can't give her. And it's just a really, really incredible performance. So that brings me to a really tough choice, because for my fourth slot, I've got to choose between Eyes Wide Shut and Magnolia. And
I'm very interested in seeing where you go here.
Either way, you lose.
Right, 100%. So I'm going to put the biggest Thunderbolts asterisk in the world on this choice, and I'm going to give it to Eyes Wide Shut, clearly just because he's the protagonist rather than a supporting character.
Right, he has a
he's
side
on the screen
character
for
in Magnolia.
longer.
Yeah.
Incredible performances in both. Eyes Wide Shut is a weird movie that proves that Tom Cruise is a weird guy. And I always wonder what our sort of alternate Hollywood would have looked like over the next 25 years or so if Cruise leaned more into that aspect of himself rather than the couch jumping, freaking him out, and him completely shutting out everybody from his private life whatsoever.
I think that movie kind of broke him in a way. I mean, and the fact that he's doing like Magnolia right after, because Eyes Wide Shut was such a long shoot. Like you essentially him doing, I'm gonna do this weird psychosexual marital drama for 2 years with my actual wife.
Yeah, exactly, with my
actual and which like
and a director who needs like 50 takes of me walking through the door.
Right. And you know that Cruise just has such a reputation of like a person that it's like, I want to be a people pleaser, or like I want to do a quote good job. And so I'm just like imagining like him doing like 100 takes of like walking through a door, and Stanley Kubrick just being like, you know, kind of just for like, we might as well get another one, just sort of being like, Cruise, do it again, and Tom being like, what am I not doing correctly? And even like some of those scene, like that scene of him and Nicole Kidman fighting in the bathroom is one of the like cringiest, most uncomfortable things I've ever seen in a movie. It's because even if they're not
uncomfortable,
even if they're not fighting about what they're fighting, you can tell that like they've done this scene so many times that they are actually fighting about something that is like I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, but in the way that like it feels like they are a couple working through actual tensions in real time on that movie.
Yeah, I don't think that's conspiratorial at all, because like if you were around pop culture around the time this came out,
tabloids.
This is the movie that killed Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
And then it's also when people are like, oh my gosh, can you believe that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman got divorced? You're like, yeah, I saw the movie. I can totally believe that.
If you look in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest movie shoot of all time, it is Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes.
That movie shot for 15 months. 15 months on a major production, and apparently Tom Cruise was getting sick, like he got an ulcer. He was getting sick from just constantly doing this stuff again and again and again.
And then
but it's really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And then he goes from that to Magnolia, which is essentially PTA writing a role specifically for him that is like, I want you to work through all of the complicated relationships with your dad in this role. And like that scene where he is like goes over to James Robards' house near the end of the movie and is like sobbing on the bed, that there even is something kind of uncomfortable about that, of like, you're actually, I'm pretty sure, like watching a man like work through real complicated feelings he has about his own father through this role, and like what Tom Cruise is just like emotionally going through, and like the way his body is like convulsing as he's like crying and like trying to strain back emotions. It's I think those two movies like really just sort of like, I broke him in that like I got too naked in front of audiences in a weird way.
Can't do that again.
Yeah. Well, now we've entered the 2000s, and I don't have as much of a treasure trove of riches to pick through as you guys.
Yeah, the 2000s are a little rocky.
But there's still some great ones in there. I'm going to go a little out of order, but I think I have to throw in the two Spielberg collaborations, Minority Report and War of the Worlds. Both because I think that period of Spielberg is really fascinating, where he's doing like really dark, complicated movies that essentially are about like 9/11 paranoia. And like Minority Report is this incredible twisty noir movie that also Cruise is, as an actor, sort of carrying, has to, as an actor, carry all this guilt and trauma that this character has gone through. But it is this like fast paced, energetic, like one great set piece after another Spielberg movie, but also is a bit about like the Patriot Act and like the erosion of privacy in like American culture, and the idea of like, you know, how far do we want the Justice Department to go in terms of like how likely you are to commit a crime, and does that equal the same thing as actually being found guilty? And then War of the Worlds, which I will contest is like falls apart in its last third, but the first 2/3 are terrifying. I remember seeing that as a kid.
So much tension. Oh my gosh. The scene in the basement is
See, that's when the movie kind of starts to fall apart a little bit for me, but like
but the tension in that scene is unbelievable.
Yes, and the 2 hours going up to there, it's the closest Spielberg since Jaws has done to like a straight horror movie. I mean, it is a very apocalyptic movie that Spielberg is very intentionally pulling on 9/11 iconography and essentially doing a movie about our national fear of being attacked on the home front, but as an alien invasion movie. And I just remember seeing that movie as a kid, and it scared the living bejesus out of me.
Well, the plants, like the vines that the aliens have brought with them, aren't they like bleeding the whole time? There's bleeding. So much blood.
I mean, when people get evaporated by the lasers, it turns into ash, and so there's like, you know, very reminiscent of the like footage from the World Trade Center of people covered in ash and rubble, and like that's how people are running around in this movie. Just, I think, like this period to me, like me growing up in this era of Cruise, like Cruise represented like the like biggest kind of summer blockbuster you could have, and a kind of like serious summer blockbuster that is also like it's going to be a cut above everything. And I think these two Spielberg movies really representing like it was Spielberg and Cruise, like top of the poster, like you knew that was going to be like the biggest thing of the summer. And even if those movies didn't turn out being the biggest thing of the summer, because they're both kind of like very dark and sort of weird and about haunting things in the real world, there's something really interesting about them, and I think are really unique blockbusters for him to make during this period.
So the interesting thing, first of all, I think Minority Report is more rewatchable. I like Minority Report better than I do War of the Worlds.
I would agree. A Minority Report, I think, is like in the top tier of Spielberg, in my opinion, and War of the Worlds is like a B+.
Well, but the thing I was going to say about War of the Worlds that, you know, in our conversation about Cruise that I think is interesting is that it's a departure for him, because he doesn't play like the guy who's like great at everything he does.
He's kind of a loser.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we're so used to Tom Cruise as unbeatable. And yes, spoiler alert, he survives until the end, but he doesn't survive because he's like better than everybody else and more clever and all this other. No, it's just kind of like, it's sort of dumb luck.
Yeah.
And he just, you know, luckily gets in the right place at the right time at times. But it's a departure for Tom Cruise from playing Superman to play everyman.
Yeah. So the other two that I want to mention, I feel like even though I think this movie is kind of bad, it is a fascinating bad. It is Vanilla Sky, which is him reteaming with Cameron Crowe, trying to recapture the magic of Jerry Maguire, remaking this Spanish film called Open Your Eyes, getting Penelope Cruz kind of right as she's starting to like more turn into like an American superstar. They were actually dating at the time too. And doing this, and she was in the original Spanish language version of this movie. Cameron Diaz also in this in a very bizarre role that I wish I could repeat some of her lines on this podcast, but that might cause us to put an explicit warning up on them. This is one of those movies that I think I saw when I was like 15, and this is really going to make you guys laugh. Like one of those movies you see when you're a teenager and you're like, wow, what a thoughtful, deep, powerful movie about existing in the world and about relationships. And then go back and watch it as an adult and you're like, this movie is utter nonsense and is so laughable and ridiculous and is kind of awesome in sort of like the final third when it sort of turns into like a bit more of a science fiction movie, but is like,
dude, I can't believe that this is one of your picks.
I
hate
I'm
Vanilla
with you.
Sky.
I'm with you.
I had to pick. It was like that, or I wasn't going to pick like Last Samurai. Like that movie's kind of a bore.
Wait,
Vanilla
gonna...
Sky, for as bad as it is like you kind of watch it and you're like, I mean, it is wild that this movie was a huge hit in the early 2000s solely on the back of Tom Cruise, and it somehow like. It is all of the sort of vanity of Tom Cruise on full display in this really fascinating way in a movie that just like flat out totally doesn't work.
All right,
I'm with you.
Finish
Seconded.
up
Seconded.
When you finish up, there's going to be a movie that you left out that I'm going to be like, I can't believe you left this out. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, my last one's going to be Collateral because I got to rep for my boy Michael Mann, and
I'm with you 100% on this one. This is a good call.
This is, I think, the last like really.
I think this is his best movie of the 2000s.
I would probably agree. It's very close between this and Minority Report, and Collateral. If folks haven't seen this great Michael Mann thriller with Jamie Foxx playing an LA cab driver who unsuspectedly picks up a hitman played by Tom Cruise, who basically forces him at gunpoint to drive around LA and. So Cruise can basically like whack people all night. And this moral dilemma that the cab driver finds himself in. I just think this is Cruise in the rare role where he plays a villain. Like, is there any other role that you guys can think of where he's like explicitly a bad guy and is like a really terrifying villain in this movie, but also has this like cool like silver fox haircut, and he's like leaning into the fact that he's getting a little older, and it's a really crazy fun performance. I just like giggle with joy every time I see the scene of like him coming out of the of the building when Jamie Foxx is being mugged, and he just tells the thugs, he's like, yo homie, is that my briefcase, before just like shooting them like 8 times. It's just like one of the craziest things you'll ever see in a movie, and like one of those moments where it's just like this movie went from 0 to 100 in like 30 seconds right now.
I literally had in my notes that Collateral is Tom Cruise's only bad guy role, like of his entire life. Like he's not a bad guy in Lestat. He's in Interview with he's not a bad. He's really not.
He's more like a mischievous. Yeah.
This is truly Tom Cruise playing the villain.
Are we not going to count Tropic Thunder? He's fine with
no.
He's fine with them getting
not.
killed for the insurance money.
But I had a note. I was like, I really wish someone would have said to him, "Hey Tom, try this. Not all the time, of course, but just a little more often. Play against type. It would have been so much fun because he is so great in Collateral."
Like in Magnolia, I guess like that character is meant to be like super disgusting and off-putting in Magnolia, but like there's a degree of empathy. But I wish he would have done more villain roles, because I mean he still can. He's I believe in him, but yeah, this is just like a really fun example of him totally pivoting from his persona and doing something and just like absolutely owning bones with it. It's, if you haven't seen Collateral, just like what an electric piece of filmmaking.
So good.
So I was going to say the one that I think you left out that I would have included is I would have included Tropic Thunder. And I would have said, you can go on YouTube and find a compilation of nothing but the Tom Cruise scenes from Tropic Thunder, because
that'll be my Taps pick of just sort of like the you know the like, oh, it's kind of like funny that he did this sort of thing.
When Tom Cruise is not on camera, Tropic Thunder to me is just kind of like, it's okay. It's it's fine. It's got a great cast and they've all charisma and stuff.
I haven't seen it in years. I'd be curious to revisit it, but
when Tom Cruise is on camera in this movie, he is. Everyone else is at an 8. He's at a 14.
Right.
I mean, he is so great in this movie. The final scene where he sends Bill Hader on his way after they've collected their Oscar, and he's like, "Yeah, you go to the party, tell people you did a good job. I'm staying here," and then he dances. Like, come on!
He's very funny in the movie. I think I got a little bit burned by. Do you guys remember? Like a few years after that, he hosted the MTV Movie Awards as that character, and it was a little bit of like
Les Grossman.
It was a little bit of kind of like, oh, that was like funny when you came in and did that for like a couple scenes in this movie, but now that you're doing this hosting an award show, it's like it was the weird thing of like he tried doing it again. No, it actually just sort of became gross. Like that character is like very vulgar and kind of like disgusting in the movie, but it was a rare case of like that was really funny for you to do that once, and then somewhat misreading the room of being like, that was the funniest part of that movie. Let's get him to host the MTV Movie Awards as that character, and it just sort of being like, this is just kind of uncomfortable to watch the entire time.
All right, how are we going to handle the rest of his career?
So
you tell me, Jesse.
I'm gonna propose that there are 3 movies that I think belong in the Hall of Fame for the 2010s through 2020s, or where we are today. I think
Oblivion, The Mummy. What else?
Rock of Ages, Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit. Yeah, Night and Day. Wow, forgot about that one. So
you just mentioned 2 of the ones that I hinted at the beginning, like Rock of Ages is garbage.
That's a diarrhea level movie.
Yeah, you can't fault Tom Cruise for that. He's going for it. He's doing his own singing. He's playing a weird rock star.
He's good. He's like the only good thing in that movie.
He's the one redeemable thing about that movie.
He's fine, but I think the 3 movies
you
that
said about the Jack Reacher Shadow Recruit. That's the one I mentioned that I'm like, I have no clue why he did this. Because I'll give him one.
I think it's the same thing that the reason in this decade he comes back to Mission Impossible and this is after kind of he has kind of a dip period in the late 2000s where after some bad, PR incidents, he kind of, his fame dwindles a little bit. Mission Impossible kind of brings him back. And then we're in this sort of franchise era where he's like, I need to find franchises. So he starts doing a lot more Mission Impossible movies. He tries to make Jack Ryan The Mummy, he tries to make into a franchise, and that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
I think that Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout might be the 3 best Mission Impossible movies.
I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying, like, he strategically, in terms of his career, I think is looking for what are franchises I could do. I feel like the 3 movies that we should put in, Fallout, I think, is me personally the best of the Mission Impossible movies, but Rogue Nation and Ghost Protocol are all great. I think
I won't argue with you. I agree. The bathroom. By the way, we don't get good fight scenes in movies anymore.
Yeah, true.
Especially from Tom Cruise, probably because he's gotten too old. But the bathroom fight scene in Fallout is probably the best 10 minutes in any Mission Impossible movie.
That is just one of those movies where just like it's one. Like every set piece in that movie would be the best set piece in any other Mission Impossible movie.
Yep.
Then I think you have to throw in Top Gun Maverick, which is, the rare case of a sequel that I think is immensely better than the 80s original and finds a way to, do a movie that is both a better action movie as well as takes the audience familiarity with the first movie and uses that to sort of make an even emotionally deeper movie. And then Edge of Tomorrow, which I think is the best he's been in the last, I guess it's past 10 years at this point because it's 2025. But, that movie is like the most exciting I think he's been on screen in this 2010s, 2020 period, because it's him doing a kind of full meta commentary on like the snarky fast talking trickster Tom Cruise of something like Few Good Men, and then by the end morphing into the like indestructible Mission Impossible Tom Cruise,
Right.
as well as it's just like a really kick-ass action movie that
I think Edge of Tomorrow is literally his most rewatchable film. If that is on and I come across it, I'm sitting down, I'm sinking into the chair, and I'm not doing anything until it is over. I think Edge of Tomorrow may be his most enjoyable movie.
It's
Definitely
great.
up there.
So
I
what do you
think
guys
it's one of
think to
those-
those three as kind of our the
think
best of
those are
his like
fair.
more recent year movies?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I love Edge of Tomorrow. I think it has a few third act problems. I think it kind of starts running out of gas before the movie's
agree.
over.
I agree with
But
that.
the first two acts of that, like, yeah, it's as close to perfect as you can get. For our sort of honorary Taps choice, I would throw out American Made, which
I was just
feel
going to
Oh,
say this.
Yeah, he's
I
he's
feel
I
fun
really
in
like
that.
American Made.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not fair that it bombed. I think it's because people didn't realize the kind of movie it was, and that's our last movie that we have from him so far, at least, where he has stepped out of the action movie comfort zone, where he's playing a real guy. He's
Yeah.
doing some acting, and
There's no sequel possibility.
yeah,
That's what makes it unique.
exactly. And so, but when that one tanked, I think that's when he just went full blown franchise all the time.
Yeah.
So, which is a bummer
Well,
for me. So, yeah, if you haven't seen American Made, check that one out as well.
Yeah, he's pretty funny in it. I remember thinking he was a little miscast because he's playing someone in like his 30s in that movie from what and has
Yeah.
like a bad wig and stuff, but he's having fun and is kind of the reason to see it. What's you guys' hype level for the Alejandro Iñárritu movie he's in next year?
I'm excited that Tom Cruise is doing something that's not an action movie. Iñárritu,
Probably the only person who could get me interested in an Iñárritu movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say Iñárritu for me is like cilantro. I know some people love him, but he tastes like soap to me. I can't.
He's my movie director nemesis, and I say
I
that
can't, yeah.
in somewhat of an endearing way. But
Yeah,
I agree. His movies are like I walk out and I like want to throw like booze and popcorn at the theater.
Well, and it's a good thing he's so modest about him, though. Like, I really appreciate that he doesn't have an ego.
I was going to say, I mean, I like Birdman, but other than that, everything else that Iñárritu has done is too long, too pompous, too full of itself and self-congratulatory and all that other kind of stuff. Yeah. So
I just pretend Leo's Oscar. I pretend Leo's Oscar was for Wolf of Wall Street or Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah. Or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That too. There you go.
Wild that we gave him an Oscar for the role sandwich between his two best performances, but we can save that for a Leo show.
I got a Tom Cruise question.
Okay.
Are you guys ready for him to stop making action movies? To
Yes.
stop doing big stunts?
100%.
Yes. I think it'll be a really I think it's a fun note in his career that he's basically in his 50s and 60s basically became like the American Jackie Chan in a weird way.
Yeah.
But you know, or the 21st century equivalent of Buster Keaton, but no, I want him to keep being in movies, and he's a great actor. He's proven that he can be a great actor, and I'm sure there'll be some, you know, movie where he's like an old man taking someone on a road trip and they'll give him like an honorary Oscar or something like that. But I would love for him to, you know, do another movie with Aaron Sorkin, do another Spielberg movie, you know, like he's still got juice. So even if he can't jump out of planes, I still want to see him and stuff.
Yeah, to mention an actor that we brought up, you know, several minutes ago now, I'm ready for Tom Cruise's Paul Newman era.
Yes.
That's a great take. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, by 62, Paul Newman was already well in his Paul Newman era. But, you know, age works different now in modern Hollywood. I want him to be, you know, a washed up grandpa who's trying to, you know, get back in with the family. Or I want him to be, you know, Paul Newman in The Verdict, where he's like an alcoholic lawyer trying to get his dignity back or something.
That's the perfect role that I would love for him to do is something like that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind if Tom Cruise did a film where he wasn't the main character, that he was in a little bit of more of a supporting role of a younger actor, and B, you can do a little, wink wink to his action past, have his
Sure.
character have an action moment or two, but it should mostly be Tom Cruise doing some of the great stuff I talked about that he did in the late 80s that are roles where there's no action at all, and there's no action in Rain Man. There's very little action in Born on the 4th of July, and there are plenty of other movies that we've talked about here where he's shown he can do something more than that. So
the first Mission Impossible movie is really his only action movie in the 90s as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm concerned about this era though, because I feel like he's been, the king of Hollywood for so long. I think that where a lot of these great later year performances from actors come from are when they're okay with being told no every once in a while, like when they have a director they can fully trust to be like, no, don't do the smile. We don't need the wink. Like, just, and I don't know if he's in a position where he'll listen to stuff like that now.
I would love to see him work with someone like Tarantino. Like, who knows what the 10th, like,
wow.
but like, that would be like, talk about someone who like understands actor personas and understands how to both use them in ways like, think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, knows how to use Leo in a way that is different than Leo's persona, but also understands how to give Pitt like the best role of his career in a movie and a role that just perfectly encapsulates what makes Brad Pitt great as a star.
That's another big Tarantino what if, because if I'm remembering correctly, in the very early stages of that film, he was talking to Tom Cruise for the Leo role.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I feel like
really?
that's one of the big what ifs, like what if Will Smith hadn't have said no to Django? Like, I feel like those are both two cases where you would have seen actors with entirely different careers than they have now.
All right, so let me follow up my question.
Yeah.
Do you guys think Tom Cruise will get away from, over the top stunts and action and get into more serious stuff? The fact that he's doing an Inarritu movie next, maybe he's going to go a different direction.
I think he knows that. I mean, he's only getting older. There's only so much like voodoo magic from the Church of Scientology that you can do to keep doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's only so long that the thing about we're going to watch him die during a stunt stays a joke. Like, the older he gets, the less the reflexes are up there. And I think he's, based on what we've seen over the last few years, I don't think the last two missions were good shoots for him for a
very long
of different
and
reasons.
Yeah,
very chaotic. Very, they essentially shot 4 different movies to get these 2 movies. Yeah, and so I could see him wanting to step back from the chaos for a little bit.
Well, guys, I need to go eat dinner, but this has been really fun talking about Tom Cruise, someone who I know means a lot for all of us. I'm trying to think who would be the next like movie star that we could do a similar, maybe like Denzel or Julia Roberts, like when they have movies this year, because I know Julia Roberts is in the Luca Guadagnino movie. Denzel's reteaming with Spike.
We got like, Denzel and Spike coming up.
Like those feel like, although Julia Roberts doesn't start until the 90s, we'll find someone who we could do these kind of like.
We could throw some Steel Magnolias and Mystic Pizza in there.
That's true. That's true. Well, guys, this has been a blast. Talk to you again in the coming weeks, and I'm gonna go rent Taps and keep the cruise marathon going.
When you see Taps, I want you to come back here and tell us about it.
I will, and I'll fill you guys in once I finally give my final bass drum with Mr. Cruise in the movie theater.